Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Diana Alarcon, and I am a part of the marketing team here at Ionic. We have a very exciting presentation today that is brought to you by our trusted partners, OpenForge, on the topic of advanced monorepos with Angular, Vue, and Stencil. So before I officially introduce our presenters for today and we get started on the presentation, I'm just going to be going over a few housekeeping items with everyone here. So this presentation is being recorded and will be available for reference a little bit later. We will be having a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so make sure that you're inserting your questions into that Q&A field that should be near the bottom of your screen. So I see people are actively already using the chat, so don't need to tell you where the chat is. I see hi from France, greetings from the Netherlands. So happy to have you guys here. But so once again, if you do have any questions, feel free to filter those through the Q&A, and we'll get to all of those, as many of them as we can. So just going through some of those housekeeping items. Once again, it is being recorded, and I'll have a recording out to you a little bit later today or later this week. But it's my absolute pleasure to be inviting our friends here from OpenForge. With us, we have Paulina Gallo, who is mobile operations and developer. That's her title. We also have Fernando del Olmo here, and he is a mobile app engineering specialist and software engineer, both from the fabulous OpenForge team. So take it away, you guys, and thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Diana and Ionic team. Welcome, everybody. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining us today. We're so glad to be here, and I'm super glad we have the opportunity to share some of our experiences with you, especially about advanced monorepos with Angular, Vue, and Stencil. Let's go right ahead and kick it off. First slide is me. Like Diana said, my name is Paulina Gallo. I am the Director of Mobile Operations here at OpenForge. I am a developer as well. My background is a developer. I've led our development teams, and recently I took on internal operations here at OpenForge. Little background about me, I've been using Ionic since 2015, all the way back to Ionic 1, if anybody remembers that. With Angular.js. So I've been at the starting point with Ionic and have seen it grow throughout many years. I have personally built and released and updated numerous hybrid applications of all different types. I love front-end technology. A fun fact about Fernando and I, our nicknames here at OpenForge are CSS wizards. We love front-end, we love CSS. Whenever there's a problem, our teammates know who to call when it involves CSS. And I will pass to Fernando.
Okay, thank you, Paulina. So, yep, I'm software engineer and mobile app engineering specialist at OpenForge. I have been working here since many years. I'm located in Spain, Madrid. So I'm working remotely for OpenForge. And as Paulina mentions, we are the CSS wizards on OpenForge. And we have been working in a lot of projects for hybrid apps. And that's our background.
Yeah.
So, Paulina.
And you've also used Ionic since Ionic 1.
True, that's also true.
Back in those days.
Back old days with Angular and JS.
I know, right? Seems like forever ago. Just a little bit about OpenForge. OpenForge was founded in 2018. We are based here in Philadelphia. And like Fernando said, we have team members worldwide. And we try to get together as often as possible. This photo is actually from our company retreat. We value our internal company and getting together as much as possible and being a team, even though we are separated by miles and miles away. A little bit more about us. We are primarily mobile focused. Mobile apps are our specialty, from providing services from consulting, ASO, all the way to full application development. We've pretty much tapped into every type of mobile application since I've been here at OpenForge. We love user experience. We really truly focus that as part of one of our specialties here at OpenForge. And like I said, like Diana said as well, we are a trusted partner with Ionic. So we've used primarily Ionic Framework development, Angular Firebase, App Store optimization. Yeah, we specialize and love building mobile applications. So yeah, let's dive in for today. So just a brief overview of the agenda for today. We're going to be just briefly touching on what is a monorepo, the what and the why, talking about shared components. What is a shared component? Looking at Stencil. Fernando and I have a demo that we're going to be going over with the group today. So reviewing some Stencil components, integrating them into an Angular and Vue application, talking about some best practices, some tips and tricks, recommendations, and remarks and Q&A. So yeah, short, sweet, and simple. And let's take it away. Fernando, why don't you start with monorepos?
Yeah, let's start for the big one. So in this demo, we are going to explain and demonstrate that the benefits of monorepo, because you can have multiple apps, and that means you can set different pipelines for different builds with only one project or one repo on GitHub. So this has a lot of benefits. As you can create, as we're going to see in this demo, you can buy a library of components that we can reuse in different apps, and those apps can be different technologies. So it's like the next step for the web development. And I think almost every company or every team, I think, will be having a lot of benefits if they move to monorepos. And we highlight some benefits of monorepo here, but we are going to show them on a demo later.
Yeah, and these are just benefits of specifically NX. We use NX primarily as our monorepo framework here at OpenForge, but there are other monorepo solutions out there. We just personally love the benefits of NX. So we reference the standards and best practices of NX. We enjoy being able to code share and have management of our workspace. We like that we're able to specifically rebuild and retest what's impacted of changes. It's heavily supported by the community. There's a lot of plugins and a lot of things that are excellent about NX. I know I called out plugins for everything: Ionic, React, React Native, all the fun stuff on the web. So yeah, we at OpenForge just prefer NX, but like Fernando said, we see more and more web development companies come in and be interested in monorepos in general.
Yes, the good part also for NX is that they support officially a lot of technologies, but the good part is that they have also a community place where all the people is creating and pushing different kind of plugins, like support other technologies that is not officially supported, or any other type of extra details that we can use. So it's being bigger and bigger, the community under NX. So that's another good option.
Yeah. Moving along, you might be asking yourself, coming into this presentation, why would you have a monorepo with multiple frameworks? Isn't that a little weird or different? And yeah, it is. But I've found, just talking with other customers and other development agencies, that companies use multiple kinds of technology. And even from our own experiences, we've had multiple repositories for the same project. I'll give an example, and I think Fernando knows. Typically, we create a repository for our app side, a repository for, let's say, an admin portal, and a repository for server-side code. That's 3 different repositories. That's chaotic. And having them separate, they don't have any benefits not being together. I found myself a lot of the time years ago copying and pasting code from one to another. And, copying and pasting code is fine, but there's always that chance of developer error. And putting them together in a mono repo, there's so many advantages of having shared functionality, getting an advantage of typing, and not having to create the same components again. And we found as well that when we were using a mono repo structure, we ended up having a better CI/CD process. Our QA team was giving us better feedback as well. They were reporting tickets, and the tickets and issues would be scattered across all 3 repos. But now we have it in one mono repo, and it's more controlled and more specific on what needs to be worked on, which gives the developer an opportunity to be able to look at the mono repo structure and know what to effectively do.
Sorry, Paulina, I have another point on the multiple frameworks.
Sure.
So other example that maybe is more realistic is, for example, a company that have different teams in different locations, for example, and each team is creating a different app, but all of them are using the same branding and the same components. So that way, having the shared library in the Monorepo and then having 2 projects is easily to have all the same branding, and that will be helping a lot to all the teams that are using the same components on different technologies, for example.
Yeah, and I think that translates into what we wanted to talk about next, which is a shared component.
Yes.
What is a shared component? And typically what we like to describe a shared component here at OpenForge is something reusable. I know in Angular, a shared component allows you to organize and streamline your code. So like commonly used components, directives, pipes, etc., having them all in one module and being able to dynamically import them. And in Vue, it's pretty much similar, being able to create your own components and share them wherever you need it. But the key to me is a shared component needs to feel like it's reusable. And from my own personal experience of learning about shared components, I feel like sometimes I feel inclined and have an urge to make everything a shared component, which is not realistic. And it's not always the case of having everything be a shared component. A little bit of background about our process here at OpenForge. We go through a discovery and design phase anytime we have a new application come through our doors. And typically what that does at the end of the discovery and design phase, we have a clickable prototype. So it being like a Marvel or Figma, something that we can reference and go off of as a UI UX base. And early on, what we typically like to do here at OpenForge is go through that Marvel as a development team, go through that Figma, and start talking about what is a shared component? What can we start to do out of the box? So some of those things are like, oh, we're noticing this ion item repeated on 3 different pages. Like, why do we need to create that 3 times? I think that should be in a shared component. Or even some modals. Modals or pop-ups can be shared as well. Having generic styles there as well. That way you're not creating the same modal component every single time. And we found if we don't do this or don't talk about it early in our process, we end up creating the same component. Even if it with little differences, it might be the same component, but I've ran into instances where Fernando and I have created the same thing. It looks the same, but it was written differently. We may get margins and paddings slightly right, our heights are right, but it's inconsistent. And it's going to cause error. So if another developer comes in and picks my modal or my component versus Fernando, then that's just kind of spreading it all over the place. You're breaking your process. And we'll talk more about best practices and what we recommend as far as a shared component later in the presentation, but just to kind of, get familiar with the shared component before we go into further in the presentation. Fernando, any points you'd like to chime in on with this?
I think you covered everything, but yes, I mean, In my experience, I see on different projects like two or four, five models that are highly the same, and only difference is the text or buttons. So it's like to have the same code like 5 times. That's a lot. So I think makes a lot of sense. Make first dive on the app when you are going to start working on that and see what can be reused through all the app, and then make them first, and then create the app and reuse them in everywhere. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah. So moving into this, and I know Fernando, you'll elaborate a bit on this. Like in Angular and Vue, you can make sure components directly in the project, but there's also Stencil. Stencil you can create shared components with.
Yes, Stencil is another amazing tool of Ionic. I have been working or testing Stencil back in the days, and it's amazing. You can create web components with only one file, and it will be working anywhere. So it's a truly nice job from Ionic. And the good part of Stencil is that also comes with the Ionic components out of the box. So you can create web component using Ionic component. So you will be having a nice branding easily just with Stencil and Ionic components. And the good part is that it's like a Ionic. You create one component and you deploy to multiple frameworks.
Yeah.
And also webs and everywhere.
Yeah, one of the biggest advantages to me with Stencil is that it's extremely flexible and versatile. And you're able to use and create stencil components big and small that can be used across any project size. I know for this presentation, the demo that we're going to be showing shortly, creating the stencil component really only took a couple minutes. It's as simple, it can be as simple as you already have an existing component or something that's component-like, and just kind of copying and pasting into Stencil's foundation or making your own. Stencil does all the heavy lifting for you and it tries to be a lightweight solution for you to integrate your custom components with.
Yes, also the good part that Stencil comes with the Ionic components is that you can go to your app and see which part of the code is being repeated everywhere, and cut and copy, and will work because it's the same components, because the Ionic component itself is built on Stencil, so it's all the same. And that's another good part of Stencil, that is just copy and paste and you will have your component.
Yeah. So let's get to the fun part. We have a demo. And we're going to run through just our code example that we'll show you. So kind of compiling everything we talked about and yeah, showing it to the group. So I will stop sharing my screen, and Fernando, you can take over.
Yes. Okay, so first we have a question for the audience. These two apps are exactly the same one, but one is written in Angular and the other one is written in Vue. Both are functional, both are working the same, but are different technologies. So my question is, which one is Vue and which one is Angular?
I know the answer.
Obviously.
Yeah, we're getting a couple answers saying that top is Angular, and check the bundle size. I mean, that is a good indicator.
Yes.
Fernando, would you like to do the honors and give the answer?
Yes. So the first one, the top one is Angular and the bottom one is Vue one. 1 second. So this one, as you see, what is the ng version, and this one is the Vue one. We hide the top bar because obviously it's the Ion icon here. I mean the icon. But I think, I don't know if this one has the, no, yes, data view up here. So yeah, this is the Vue one, and the other one is the Angular one. But the appearance and all the flow is exactly the same one.
Yeah, I saw there was a question. I should have asked which one was harder to write. And to be honest, neither were really hard to write. And we'll be getting into that a little bit later.
Yeah, we can start showing the code.
Yeah, let's go through the code.
So, for example, let's start with this is a Monorepo. We're going to have this template on GitHub as public, so anyone can use this template, and we'll have this project be working on local with this example app, and we'll have the app running with Vue and the app running with Angular. Just using the template and installing the packages following the README, and you will have these apps running. So the structure is, you have the apps, we have the Angular app and the Vue app, and then we have the our leaves, shaded leaves, and the features for these two apps. And then we have our stencil library. So the structure that we're going to explain later is that we have our stencil library with the components that we're going to share between the two apps. That is here. We have two components. These two components are going to be built and compiled, and then they are going to be imported on Angular and Vue. The good part of Vue is that can use directly the compiled files, but with Angular we need to make a ng module wrapper that imports that lib, and then the Angular app itself, it's importing that ng module. So Angular needs 2 steps, and Vue needs only 1 step. That's bonus point for Vue.
Yeah. And really quick, Fernando, I know when you and I were working on this, to me, what helped was a visual. And I would like to share with the group kind of a visual summary of what you just said. Could I share my screen?
Yes. 1 second.
All good?
Yes.
Yeah. So this was after kind of digesting what we ended up doing. I felt like this visual kind of helped it kind of explain what Fernando just said. So we have our stencil component, and we're able to directly use it in our Vue application. But Angular, on the other hand, needs an additional step, an additional wrapper. And Ionic and a couple other folks out there in the open source community help walk through exactly what you need to do as far as like creating that stencil wrapper. So that stencil wrapper to me is the translation or the step 2 of having your stencil component and then being able to import it into your Angular application. Yeah, so why don't we switch back to you, Fernando, and we can start taking a look, maybe a deeper dive at the stencil component and taking a look at that Angular stencil wrapper?
Yes. Okay, so the Angular wrapper is this one. And it's basically, so what we have is the stencil library compiles and copy the code on this place. This is all the okay. So then, okay, let's compile all the code on this file, and this file is being imported on the wrapper. this is a traditional engine module, and this engine module is the one that is going to be imported on the Angular app. And for Stencil, for Vue, there is no wrapper needed. It's just import the files, and that will be working.
Yeah. So that proxy file is automatically generated?
Yes.
And we set that in the Stencil config if we want to take a look at that. So right out of the box, anytime you create a Stencil component, there is a config file. And here you're able to set your output target. So as Fernando has highlighted, we're specifying where we want our Angular output target, which is that Stencil wrapper. So anything that we adjust in that Stencil component will automatically be deposited into that Stencil wrapper component. And you can set output targets for other frameworks and projects. I know there's an example out there with React and Svelte that does the same thing.
Yes, so that means you can have your Stencil library here, and then you can have the Angular, Vue, React, and Svelte apps differently, working the same way and using the same components, all exactly the same, but different technologies under the hood.
Yeah, and originally we wanted to do a Vue wrapper, similar, so keeping it consistent across the board with having that Stencil wrapper be our in-between step, but we found with using Vue that really wasn't necessary. So we cut out that step and directly just use Stencil components in Vue.
Yeah, here.
Yeah. Maybe let's take a look at maybe a component as an example, because I know we have two examples. We have
yes, this one, because if you see what I mentioned earlier, it's exactly the same template that you will be having on the Angular app or the Ionic app, whatever you prefer. And it's just Ion item, Ion image, Ion label, Ion button. And that's it. No imports. It's just declare your component, and that's it. Then compile the component, and that's it. Will be working.
Yeah.
I think that covers Stencil, the wrappers, and the apps.
Do we want to take a look how we were just importing in it? Maybe like let's pull up Startup Glossary, the home module, and take a look at like just using it in the app.
Yes, that's is imported on the libraries.
Mm-hmm.
For example, here, Stencil wrapper module. This is the one that imports the files compiled from Stencil, and then this library is being imported here, and then on the module, we can use directly the Stencil component.
Yeah, exactly.
And for Vue, there is no need for import anything extra. So for example, on this page, what is the component here? This is the component, and it's working the same way as the Angular.
Yeah, it just looks a little bit different in a Vue page versus an Angular page.
Yes, different bindings, different properties, but the component itself is the same one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's check on the app. So for example, this one, this is the category list item on Angular, and this is the category item on Vue. The same.
Yeah. And it's awesome to be able to drop this in and have consistency across the board.
Yes.
And I know our examples are a little bit unusual. I don't think there would ever be a use case that you would write the same application in both Angular and Vue, but Fernando and I wanted to challenge ourselves and see if we can make the same app in Angular and Vue and have the same shared component.
Yep. And other thing that we can show if there is no more surprises on the demo, we can. The good benefit also for this is that we can go to list stencil npx stencil build, and if you have changes, we compile the new changes and will automatically rerun the Vue app and the Angular app, whatever you are running. And so if you have both apps running and you need to make some changes on your component, with one change on the component will be rebuild and rerun the two apps, and you will be seeing the change appearing in the both apps and see what happens in different technologies. But should be behaving the same way.
Yeah. We had a question earlier that I definitely wanted to go back to. Someone asked that there's not Vue support in NX. Actually, the Vue support that we did in this project was from a community plugin with Vue 3. So yes, that's why we're big fans of NX. We love the out-of-the-box functionality that NX provides. I know we talked about some benefits to NX with controlled workspace, but we appreciate and want to contribute to the community of NX. So yeah, Fernando has it highlighted. We're using NX plus Vue to make this all happen.
Yes, we have the Vue 3 and Vue router, and all comes from the NX plus Vue, that is a community plugin. So it's not officially supported, but there is plugins from the community that adds this, for example, for Vue, and works fine. So it's an amazing plugin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good transition to like talking about some next points with this, Fernando.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to share our PowerPoint again. And this is to kind of go into some recommendations and tips and tricks and reflecting on like what we've learned with doing this project together. I know, Fernando, you and I had a lot of conversation around NPM link. So being able to link the stencil components to the component library, to the stencil wrapper, to Angular. We ended up having a lot of trouble with that. And we thought with using NX that it would automatically do that for us. And you can have it automatically do that with NX, but in our circumstance, we ended up having to manually run npm link to link the stencil components to the stencil wrapper, then link the stencil wrapper to the project, and then link stencil components to the project. It became a little bit repetitive, but once we had that locked down, it was pretty seamless. And then you and I recognized and saw what was happening. Like anytime we had to do npm install or remove our node modules, we'd have to set that up again.
Yeah, there was a lot of troubles also because when we were updating a library or fixing dependencies, we need to rerun everything to link again. And it's like, okay, the first times it was again, but when you start knowing what is going to do or what is doing, you know that anytime you change the package, you need to relink them again. Mm-hmm. And then it will be working fine.
Yeah, and there are ways to automatically do this that are out there. We just did not have time, and we wanted to learn the manual way and understand what is happening between linking all these things together. The next thing I want to go over is just shared component recommendations. So I know we talked about shared components before, but expanding upon that. And these are some things that here at OpenForge we tend to watch out for. So being generic is possible when it comes to component creation. I know Fernando highlighted adding properties to allow components to be flexible. So if like you have a pop-up, for instance, have some inputs of like your title text, your subtitles, etc., things that you can optionally put in your component. Not necessarily use all the time, but if you have a pop-up and you just want a title, yeah, it'll take a title, it'll take a subtitle, etc. Yeah, and components not everywhere. Create a shared component only when some template logic is being repeated multiple times in one app. So some examples, I know we've said pop-ups, but alerts, toast, graphics, common UI. I recommend if you're going down the route of having some core branding, that take a look at your buttons as well. Your buttons you might have a solid primary, a secondary outline. And it's important as you're kind of thinking about making your shared component library to document as well. So create documentation for your components, and in order for you to easily track your changes, share your components, and be able to use it anywhere. And when I say use it anywhere, have a team member come in and understand exactly what that component can do and the purpose of it. Another thing I wanted to bring up in regards to documentation is using resources such as Storybook to help create visual documentation as well. And that gives the opportunity to loop in other departments as well. If you want your marketing team to come together with your design team and sit down and establish a core branding, you can have a core branding library that you can use across multiple applications. And using a visual tool such as Storybook helps track those changes as well. I know that's something that we're trying to do here at OpenForge, and it helps align the departments in a sense of we get to work closely with our designers and our marketing team to help support our branding guidelines, the style guides, and making sure that we're not adding another button to the Marvel or another button to the Figma without consulting our Storybook to make sure, like, hey, we already have that. Why don't we just use this? Or, hey, this is kind of new. Let's talk about it and put it into our Storybook and make that a shared component. And yeah, take time to maintain your components. If you're thinking about having a component library, make it a priority and start. And like I said, loop in other departments and team members that are interested. Get them excited and get them involved with what you're thinking. Yeah, Fernando, yes. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I have some points. Another bonus point for the next is that they also officially support Storybook, if I'm not wrong. So yes. That's another point. So you can create all the components you want. All of them, if possible, will be sharing between different apps, and you also will be able to have your Storybook with all these components to show or tell the other department to see, okay, these are the buttons, these are the inputs, these are the modals, whatever you need to do. And it's easy to maintain and to develop all these new components in the future to follow the same branding or the same UI or the rules that you are going to apply in your company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, moving on. I wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the problems we had. I think it's important, as excited we are and proud that we were able to do this together, I think it's important to recognize that we had problems along the way that I definitely want to share with the community. We ran into a big dependency issue. So having Vue and Angular and NX was kind of messy to put together in one repository. The Vue plugin requires a lower version of NX. So we already had the Angular application, so we had to revisit and kind of downgrade some stuff and make sure that it was still compatible with everything. I wouldn't recommend doing that. We did it for this exercise, but yeah, that was an interesting challenge that we ran into. And I know, Fernando, you learned about that there was a flag with dependency errors that you ended up having to use in a couple instances.
Yes. When I was researching about these dependencies errors, I found something about old versions of Node that for some reason there is no installing the dependencies if you already have a higher dependency in your top level. For example, if you have a package A that depends on package B version 10, for example, and then package B have another dependency, version 5, and you have already the version 10 on the root level, it won't be installing the level 5. So that will be making some conflicts or dependencies because maybe your package B need specifically the version 5, but you are installing version 10. So that comes some errors of dependencies that are difficult to fix because you are not the owner or of that package. So there is a flag that is legacy peer deps that is enable or fixing or making a workaround for the moment to solve the dependency errors. It's not the best solution, but it's a solution for the moment until a newer version of Node resolve this issue.
Yeah. We also just had an issue making that stencil layer, the Angular stencil layer. I know Fernando and I were going back and forth trying to figure out a compiling issue of having that stencil component translate into that middle layer into the Angular app. And the stencil documentation definitely did help, but we ended up having, again, dependency issues at that time, as that stencil wrapper required some dependencies. So definitely keep an eye out on that if you are interested in doing something similar of having stencil in your Angular application, having that stencil layer. And I know we did not mention on the previous slide the NPM link. Yeah, we had issues with that a little bit. And I know Fernando and I got tongue-tied trying to figure out at one point when we removed our node modules, oh no, we broke our connection entirely. There is a plugin that Fernando found that actually shows you in Visual Studio what is kind of linked to what. And that definitely helped us out. There's a link in our slides that will be sent out. So if you're interested in installing that, I definitely recommend it. It helped us a ton with that. Any other problems, Fernando, that we want to call out?
No, I think most of them were dependencies, versioning. I think that's all. There was some IB errors, but I think this was related with the versioning that was using old ones or not supported ones. So yeah, I think mostly all the errors comes to be dependency ones.
Yeah, and once we were through those, it became smooth sailing. So once we had kind of our package.json lockdown, we stopped having problems. Yeah, let's talk about some recommendations. I definitely recommend if Angular and Vue aren't up your pace, but you're interested in trying out some stencil components and some shared components in your Monorepo. I know Ionic and Stencil have examples for React and Svelte. And I know Fernando and I were so thrilled to do this presentation that we're going to be continuing to add examples to our project. So doing the same thing that we did with Angular and Vue, and we're going to work on adding that to our Monorepo in React and Svelte. And I recommend just staying up to date with Monorepo trends. We found this really cool link. I know we're really big into NX here at OpenForge, but there's other information in monorepos out there that you can use. If you're interested in getting started with a monorepo or having an existing structure, we still recommend trying to stay up to date with the latest trends and updates, even looking at community support and seeing what's going on there. Like we said earlier, we found our Vue support for NX through a community plugin. So definitely keep an eye out in the community with what's going on. Yeah, Fernando, any other recommendations on your end?
No, I think we covered everything about the Monorepos. Just keep out an eye on anything news on X, for example. And also, if you enter this link for the Monorepo tools, this link is provided by NX, but it's also making a comparative between all the different tools that are other alternatives than NX, so you can find a lot of information there, topics, best practice, tools, examples, anything you need. That's the link for the Monorepos. And I think that's all.
Yeah. And just to kind of bring it back to OpenForge a little bit, we have our OpenForge Mobile Academy. So please subscribe to our website. We'll be sharing updates similar to this presentation and just continued updates as an example of Fernando and I updating this repository with React and Svelte. So if you feel inclined to do so, please subscribe. You can do so directly on our website. And we are hiring as well for developers. So if anybody is interested, feel free to apply on our website. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for attending. And final thoughts. If there's any takeaway from this presentation, I definitely recommend, if you're using a Mono repository, to look into Stencil and look into what we went over in regards to shared component. Definitely take advantage of what is out there and make your own shared components, branding guidelines, etc. Fernando, any final thoughts?
No, thank you all for joining. And I think there is no final thoughts. That's everything from me.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, Diana, for having us.